So this week's chapter is about looking at children's unique individual temperament traits. And it's actually based on research that was done in the late 50s by Alexander Thomas and Stella Chess. You can look that up, you can Google it. It's called the New York Longitudinal Study. And what they found is they went into an infancy ward and they were able to measure these 9 dimensions of temperament traits. These 9 traits, they could measure dimensions. And they followed these babies. Actually, the study is still happening now. And what they found is that many babies would come into the world with strong traits on one side or the other. Some were kind of in the middle. But they found that a lot of these traits actually stay the same throughout our lifetime. And that might concern you right now when you hear this and you've got a 3- and a 1-year-old who are freaking out and having major temper tantrums. We grow into our traits, you know, but what's interesting and what's important about this is if you can start looking at the individual traits in your child, it really helps you figure out who you're parenting. It helps get rid of the negative labels. And you may think, well, am I not labeling my child as I go through this, putting numbers on traits? No, when I'm talking about labels, I'm talking about labels that I often hear from parents, and they're never true. No label is true, period. If I were to challenge you right away to do anything, I would challenge each and every one of you to get rid of any label you use describing your kids. Again, no label is true. Even the positive labels, you know, when we say, oh, you're such a good girl. Well, for parents with younger kids, sometimes when they hear me say that, they're like, what the heck is wrong with calling somebody a good girl? Well, labels are a judgment of a person's character. When we label kids, it stops them from experiencing the freedom of getting feedback and not taking it personally. When we label kids, we're attaching this judgment to their character, and they become very sensitive about feedback, and it really does affect self-esteem. So as we go through this course, for example, in week 4, I'm going to talk to you about how you can actually praise kids and encourage them to take responsibility without using a lot of evaluative terms. But just see what happens this week if instead of using labels, you just describe the behavior. You describe what it was that your child did that was so great. Instead of good girl or whatever, say, you know, you just held the screen door open for me while I was struggling with my bags. You're describing behavior. And that's actually how we lock in positive behavior with our kids, is to describe it. Likewise, when we give corrective feedback, just describing the behavior also keeps them safe. So we'll get into all of that as this course continues. So the other thing that's so great about going through temperament is that we are able to articulate the triggers to challenging behavior in our kids. So in week 3, there's a chapter called Taming the Triggers. By the way, just a segue over here, in your introduction booklet, you can see everything that we talk about week to week. You know, it's listed under sidestepping, so you'll be able to see what's coming up. Antecedent management is one of your most important parenting tools. Often parent education relies on consequences. But if an antecedent, a trigger to behavior is very, very strong, it isn't fair to rely on using consequences. So just shout out to me right now what kind of antecedents can create challenging behavior in your kids.
No.
Pardon me?
The word no.
The word no, yes?
Hunger.
Hunger.
Noise.
Noise, lack of sleep. Jealousy can be one. You know, in certain situations, you're wanting to see, well, what's really going on here? Yeah.
Sensory overload.
Transition, sensory overload. Technology. Parents' behavior. I'm actually not kidding. That's why I teach parenting courses. All of these things, a move can be an antecedent. A separation, a mismatch of child and teacher at school. Peer conflict, anything can be an antecedent. And as we'll discuss, children are not able to articulate antecedents that are challenging to them. They cannot do it. Next week, we're going to talk about children's problems with feelings and just understanding their feelings and how they behave when they feel certain ways. So the truth is, it's up to us as parents and teachers to be able to articulate the antecedents that our kids are struggling with and manage them as much as possible. So we'll get right into this. But this chapter tonight will definitely help pinpoint certain antecedents. The other thing that will probably happen by the end of the night is you'll look at your sheet and you will see where there could be personality clashes. You could have a very extroverted, impulsive child and a kind of introverted, quiet parent. And this intense, extroverted child can be really overwhelming for the more introverted, quiet parent. As a matter of fact, it can almost be intimidating when you've got that kind of personality clash. You can have two intense people in a family and two other people that aren't as intense, but they get really triggered by the intensity and the loudness of those two intense people that can come together with a great big crash and thunder. So that can be a personality clash. Adult relationships can have personality clashes where, I mean, as I've done these courses, I also teach a relationship course called Mad About You. And, you know, quite often what will come up is distractibility. One partner might be quite distracted, and the other partner might get very frustrated because every time they have a conversation with their partner, they get, you know, pulled off into different things like the dog or you know, having to paint the living room or whatever it is, and it can be very frustrating. So all of this and more will be discussed tonight.